All right. First motion out of finance, and we only have, I think, 3. So I recommend that the board approve R277-629 draft 2 on second and final reading.
Thank you. There's a motion on the floor that the board approves R277-629 paid professional hours for educators draft 2 on second and final reading. Those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? That passes unanimously.
All right, thank you. Next, action item number 4, R277-919. I have a memo and an amendment, so I will read the motion out of committee and then go to the amendment, which Jeff, I believe, has. So recommended action is that the board approve R277-919 draft 2 on second and final reading. And if I could make an amendment to the motion. Yeah, I think so. That'll come up in a second here.
So will we need a second? Mark? We don't need a second coming out of committee, but will we need a second to amend?
Okay.
Not the motion, but the amendment, right?
So my amendment to the motion out of committee is that we add the green language on, let's see, I'm not sure what line this is. Beginning of line 106 of draft 2, we add the language, if a minimum funding level is required by state law for an originating program. And then scrolling down a bit, add to subsection C, if a minimum funding level is required by state law for an originating program. The blue language is already in the draft passed out of committee, so I'll continue on with the green language. So the next part of the amended motion would be that the board replace regularly with yearly on line 111 and add the words, including any unduly adverse effect on an originating program, to the end of line 112. And in subsection E, a plan for yearly would replace regularly, reporting to the superintendent regarding budgetary expenditures from restricted funds to ensure compliance, and add the language, including any unduly adverse effect on an originating program. I'm sorry, I'm repeating myself. There you go. That's
Thank
the
you.
amendment.
We have an amendment on the floor as stated. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
We have Board Member Earl, second. Would you like to speak to your motion?
Yes, briefly. So this relates to the request for funding flexibility that's in the statute. The state office is required to create an application and consider it. The language as passed out of committee would require a school, having gone through the school and district level, to describe the effect on the funding of other programs from which the money is going to be taken. They get to divert up to 35% from other programs, provided that doesn't violate state law, and prioritize that into the innovative program that they've gotten approval for at the state and district level, or excuse me, the school and district level. That seemed, based on some feedback from legislators and schools, that would require some speculation and guesswork on the part of the school that is describing what they're going to do with that flexibility and how it might affect another program. That would be better, only required if they have some minimum funding that they can't touch, and they describe the effect on the back end after it's already done. That would be more informative for us as we're trying to see how this affected other programs rather than asking them to guess up front. So that's the intent of the amendment. And I can turn to Jeff if anybody has technical
Might I
questions.
ask a question? Is this appropriate? Is the whole finance committee in unison supporting this amendment?
We didn't discuss this in finance. This came up since finance, so they have not weighed in.
That's
Everything
not
else-
helpful for me.
Everything else is in there, so.
So you didn't contact your committee members?
Okay, that's okay.
Yeah, what's in the backup in blue and red shows what we did in committee.
Sure,
What Jeff added since the committee report is here in green.
sure,
So
that's fine,
Per
thank
your
you.
amendment.
Yeah, I was just curious if you all had gone, oh, we missed something. Or
Right.
Member Lear?
I feel like this is aimed at somewhere, and I'm just being dense. So maybe you can help me with an example of a school that's having this problem and wants us to do something different.
Can I respond?
Please.
Well, the program hasn't kicked in yet, and so this would be the first time a school is able to take some money from other programs and use it to support the innovative program that they get through the community council in the school. So what I've heard from schools is, well, if we have to describe how that's going to affect the program from which we pull the money, it's hard to know that up front. Does that make sense? They're going to pull 5% from here.
Sort of. I get the fact that it's speculative, but Cindy, can I follow up?
Please.
I'm still feeling like there is a school that has something in process that would help illustrate this. You are really truly just speculating, or not speculating. That's the other side of it. But you're really truly just thinking that this could be improved based on what we were thinking would go forward, right?
Right. I heard from a couple schools that think they might use this, that say, well, how are we going to know if we get to use up to 35% of the other money? How are we going to know before we do it what it's going to do to that program for purposes of applying to the USBE? Whereas if we have that flexibility, as long as we maintain any minimal levels that those programs require, if it's CTE or class size reduction, if there's a minimum there, they can't drip below that. But they're not going to know the effect in advance.
Right.
But I don't have an example of somebody who's tried it because they're not there yet. It's just,
Right.
It would seem better to report on the back end. As long as they're not violating law on minimum effort, they do it, and then they say, well, here's the effect that had on CTE or class size, and then we would actually have something reportable. That's the idea.
Just quickly, the final comment. I'm just concerned that I'm concerned, and I was concerned when this bill came forward and the rule then came about. I'm concerned about taking away authority from LEAs. I think schools are great; they can be great innovators. I appreciate that, but the LEA is what has the legal liability that has to provide the funding, make decisions about funding, and I worry if there's too much flexibility, especially as this program starts, because I want LEAs to stay fully and completely in charge of their budgets.
Can I respond to that one too?
Please.
I'll be quick. So the LEA has the decision to approve or deny the innovation proposal
In the end.
to begin with, correct? And it goes from the community council, the teachers. So the district does have that flexibility, knowing that there could come with that approval some flexibility on the funding, which would come to us, and we would be a backstop to say, no, you've got to at least maintain this minimum level. So, that would be a kind of a double check.
Member Straight?
Yes, would it be appropriate to make a substitute motion, or is there a different way?
You have
Okay.
the opportunity to do that.
Okay, I'd like to make a substitute motion that we send this back to the committee to come back to us in our next meeting.
Okay, there's a substitute motion on the floor to send this back to committee to come back to us in the next meeting.
I'll second that.
Second, Member Lear. Would you like to speak to your motion?
I just want to make certain that I really value the recommendations made by committees. I've always felt that way. I like how they vet things out. I don't feel like what's being proposed in the amendment I'm ready to vote on. I'm not saying I'm for or against at this point. I just would like the committee to work through it.
Okay. Thank you. Member Earl?
I was actually going to speak on the other side. We'll wait on this. I'm not sure.
You're speaking to
Yeah.
the main motion?
Yeah.
Okay. Member Hanson?
Yeah, I'll speak in favor of the motion to send it back to committee, mostly because I hear the rationale, but seems to me that it would be on the LEA to make some kind of projections about what would happen to the programs that they're taking money from before they take the money. I mean, if it's been funded at a certain level and they're going to pull money from that, it would have some impact. And I know they don't know precisely what that would be, but they should be able to estimate that. That's what we do all the time, is make projections. So I'd really like to hear what the committee has to say about this.
Okay,
Speak to the substitute.
please.
So the problem with this is with a lot of things is schools starting, right? And so some schools, I think, are going to be looking to take advantage of this. So I think that delays the ability to put this into practice. And I guess just to respond to the specific concern, the district, under the general provisions of approving an innovation plan, has the ability to make that decision itself without our input. So if they're saying, you know, we're gonna do this, and the district says, well, that would divert, we don't want to approve it, then it would never come to us to start. So I think it's a program that's got 2, 3, even 4 levels of scrutiny, and this is just designed to make sure we don't hold up by forcing them in our application process to say, well, we as a school think it would do this, that, or the other thing. This is what we would plan to do. We would like to take 5% from X and stick it here, because that's what our teachers and principal and community council and district have approved. In that, given that gauntlet that they've run, this just avoids us holding them up on the level of speculation to try to figure that out. It seems the legislative intent is, if all that approval has been done and it doesn't drop below a minimum, let them go do it and then report back to us. And if there's a problem, then we can adjust. But so I would oppose the motion to send it back, just because I think it delays the time of getting this into effect.
Can we vote on the motion today without the amendment, but send the amendment back to committee so that those few schools that may want to start right now can start and say, we're going to lose 3 teachers. We don't know the exact impact on students, but here's what we think. And then the committee can decide if they want to move forward with the amendment, or do we have to send the whole thing back?
That makes sense to me.
You have a motion on the table. Right now, it'll go back to committee. If his motion fails, his amendment fails, then how it is, we've got to vote on that. Whether you,
But if the motion passes to send the amendment back to committee, then we can't vote on,
well, everything goes
The
back
whole
to
thing?
committee. Send the amendment back, everything goes back and it comes back.
and do we need the main part of the motion right now, or will it, Deputy Superintendent Stallings?
Sorry.
Save
thank
us
you.
from ourselves.
I wish I could have communicated to Jeff. I was behind him, so he didn't know. What I was going to say is this specific portion of the rule is speaking to an application to have flexibility with respect to using up to 35% of the LEAs or the school's restricted funds. So one option, if you were to refer the rule, have the rule take effect, move forward, then schools could start applying to become innovation program schools. And then what it sounds like somebody is proposing is the question about the application specifically just for the ability to use state restricted funds in an unrestricted manner would essentially be put on hold. Although the current version of the rule has a certain set of application requirements that arguably are a little stricter than maybe this amendment might loosen it up a little or make it a little different. But that would be the result if you were to take action on the rule that came out from committee. You'd have the program or the ability for schools to start applying, working with their boards to become innovation program schools. And then the specific question of what the board is going to request in the application for flexibility on funding is what it sounds like you're saying, let's have that go back to committee. So
Correct.
Yes.
So we have a substitute motion on the table to send this amendment language back to committee. If we pass the substitute motion, then the amendment language goes back to committee, but we still have the opportunity to pass the rule as it stands currently now, but this amendment would be brought back to the full board next time after committee.
If I understand the motion correctly, though, it was to send the rule back to committee, not the amendments. But one thing I might want to add is you have to consider that the way that the bill was written, the board is not involved in the approval of the innovation plan. That is completely out of your control. That is the LEA making their own decision for the schools within their LEA whether or not they want to approve some innovation plan for them. The only time the board comes into play with this program is the funding. So if you do run the risk of, if you delay part of this, you'll have LEAs creating plans that can't be funded because you have delayed on their ability to come to you to get the permission for the flexibility. So it's kind of a chicken and egg issue. You'll have to kind of decide on what you want to do in relation to that.
Okay. Member Straight?
So I would be fine to vote on the unamended portion of this, get it passed along, and then have the committee look at just the amendment. Is there a way that I could accomplish that? Or
Director Van Holten?
Another issue you have here is you're discussing amendments to a portion of a rule. So if you approve the rule without the amendments in it, you're also approving the application process that's currently in the rule without the amendments.
Okay.
So
But we can bring an amended version of that back, correct?
you can always request, board leadership can ask staff could proactively bring back the rule without board member Moss's amendments and start it all over again. It's kind of its own separate process. The risk you run there, however, though, is you have a rule that's in effect that has an application process that then suddenly you're going to amend halfway through the school year. And so you might have an application process for the schools that applied in October, November. But if they come to you in March, once you've passed the amended versions, they're now going to have a new application that they have to
Yeah.
submit with
But
changes.
the application would just be less work. So I don't know that they would complain about that necessarily, so.
Something to consider.
So, point of order.
Even if this amendment, even if this rule is passed by the board today, either amended or not amended, it's not going to become effective till the middle of October. So at least, so we're already into the middle, or into the first part of the school year. It's not like this is going to begin on day one when school starts. Is that accurate, Angie, Jeff?
Okay, so let me just get my original question answered. Can we direct this amendment idea to go back to committee for further vetting? And if we do that, can we still pass the main body motion?
You can. You'll just have
Okay.
a split process, something to
Okay.
consider.
Board member Straight, you are willing to send back just the amendment language, and is anybody opposed to that? Does anybody feel that we need to stick to the original motion to send the whole rule back to committee? Okay, then we're not going to vote on that. We're going to change, that's going to be it, okay? So, there is a substitute motion on the floor to take this amendment language and send it back to committee to be vetted. Those do you need to speak to that? No. Okay, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, that passes unanimously. Now, we're going to go back and vote to the main motion. We have a motion on the floor that the board approves R277-19 Education Regulatory Sandbox Draft 2 on second and final reading. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That passes unanimously. Chair Moss.
Okay, that works. Thank you.
That's what happened.
All right, action item 5 is approval of board discretionary funds for data research. So this is the item that was referenced this morning and for which we pulled the contract. That has moved along, and I can let Deputy Jones speak to this. It's moved along because there was only one entity out there that was already doing this type of thing, and that was the judgment of our staff. And so they found a contract, and assuming if we approve this use of discretionary funds, then the contract is also ready to approve. So I will move that the board approves the using the remaining $93,888.57 of land exchange funds, $67,544.96. I'm sorry, somebody's writing this, aren't they? I'm going to slow down. I do this in depositions too. Yeah. And 33, and
I
34.
think they have it written down.
You got everything? Okay, I'll just read it then. I got it.
You have it here?
No, I've got it. I thought somebody was dictating. And $34,000, 166 and 47 cents of state funds for a total of $195,600 for the purpose of entering into a sole source agreement with Brigham Young University to conduct research on data sharing between the State Education Agency, USBE office, LEAs, vendors, and other agencies for the purpose of reporting on the specific data being shared, the reasons for the data being shared, and the use of the data being shared.
Thank you. We have a motion on the floor as stated. Would you like to speak to your motion?
I'll speak briefly, and then I would defer to Deputy Jones, and also Member Earl was involved in bringing this to the Finance Committee. So Title 53 requires that we safeguard data, student data. We have a lot of entities that have entered into contractual arrangements in which data is being shared. The purpose of this, as brought to Finance Committee, was to get an outside entity to look at all these existing contracts and practices and processes by which data is being shared and ensure that that data is being used in compliance with state law. So if Member Earl or Deputy Jones wanted to fill in the gaps there, that's the idea. And Brigham Young University has somebody who has an arrangement for this with an entity they subcontract with that's experienced in this kind of review.
Okay, since Member Earl brought that to the committee, I'm going to go to her next because it might answer the questions from two that are actually ahead of you, and then I'll go back to the other two.
Okay, sure. And we checked into, with our staff themselves, they're running some different, I don't know if you'd call them audits, where they're looking at whether districts are actually writing the right things into their contracts, kind of a thing. But this is one step beyond that. It would be going from where the contracts are to where the data is being shared. Is the contract actually getting to, not the contract, but the sharing of data, where is that actually going and who is receiving that? So it's just understanding that. And BYU would be working with the scope of that. Clearly, we've got a lot of ed tech organizations out there that are working with our children, so they'd have to narrow the scope a little bit and then be asking that question between the different parties that share, and is the data getting where it needs to go, and who is receiving that? So it's kind of asking those questions. Hopefully I articulate that well. I'm not exactly, earlier we were talking about technology terminology. I'm not very good at technology terminology, but it's the idea of knowing who's receiving that information and how they're using it. So.
Thank you, Member Hanson.
Just a question about the scope of the actual, I guess this is an audit, how that's going to be defined. I can see, generally what's there, but I think I have questions about the detailed scope. But then also, have we considered using I saw some notes in the committee discussion about potentially using our audit, internal audit function. Has this gone through the audit committee, and have we considered that? Which might give us the ability to adapt and work a little bit better and maybe more cost effective as well.
Chair Moss.
We did discuss this, and I could probably defer to Deputy Jones. One of the items that came up was having an outside perspective is, a good thing when you're monitoring your own practices and your own contracts. So I could defer to Deputy Jones, though.
Madam Chair?
Please.
Okay, so just real quickly to your second question, right, about our own internal audit. It goes to what Board Member Earl was explaining, is so you have David Soleil, Director Soleil, and going on at the same time, right? So we're trying to parallel this, right? We're trying to tie that in. And internal audit, they have, and Mr. John's here, he can speak to it, but they already have priority. So the timing of it is to align, so that we get the most highest payoff, if you will, for the parallel processes that are going on with data privacy and the description that Board Member Earl gave, which relates to the scope question. Madam Chair, does Board Member Hanson have specific questions about the scope?
Do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, for follow-up on that.
Member Hanson.
Yeah, I guess two things, I guess, with regard to our internal audit committee. they're established particularly to be independent from the board and work independently. So I don't know that I buy the advantage of a third party doing that, or else all of our internal audits would come into question and should be done by third parties under that reasoning. But with regard to the scope, I'm just wondering, how is that going to be set? Is that going to be set by the finance committee? We have, I mean, this is fairly general right here, the specifics of that scope and seeing how it meshes with what's already going on with Mr. Soleil and all of that.
Right.
What's the process for that being established? Does that
So-
come back before the board?
So if you could call on Director Hurd, my understanding is the scope is pretty much set already. There would be no revision or addendum to the scope, but I think you need to hear from him on that.
Yes, Adam Hurd, Director of Purchasing and Contracts. And Deputy Jones is exactly right. We worked with the couple individuals at Brigham Young University and developed a scope of work which has been finalized and is included in the contract, which was included with the agenda.
Yeah, and Madam Chair, can I follow up too, Board Member Francis, follow up on the
Yes.
internal audit? It's, I don't mean to construe that they're not independent. It's just the process would be that we'd have to, the process is to prioritize what audits they're doing, right? It's not it's just, it's open to that, so it's not a question of their independence, so.
Thank you. Member Lear.
I just had a question about the process. Did this go through an RFP and BYU was the only respondent? Was it a sole source? I just want to make sure the process was clean.
Sure, yeah, we did this one as a sole source, but because of the dollar amount, we did post notice of it as required by the procurement code. We did receive one challenge from another vendor. However, in their limited response, it seemed they were proposing actual software rather than the research and audit that that this contract is intended for. So I did contact them to clarify what exactly they were offering and didn't get a response. So I was able to deny that challenge and we were able to move forward with the sole source.
Thank you.
Thank you. Member Moss.
Oh, I'm done.
Oh,
And I
you're
didn't
back.
mean to- I didn't
We're
mean to
back to the
suggest
beginning.
anything on independence. It was just an outside perspective of somebody who does this stuff.
Yeah. Okay. So I think we're ready to move to a vote. I'll say, I remember Representative Christensen saying, we're spending just under $1 million a year on data privacy and we're killing a fly with a cannon. It's a good fly to kill with a cannon. I mean, we want to keep our kids safe. But I have asked, I don't fully, know all the details that are going to be explored in this, but I did ask, is this something that really has to be done and can't be done for that $1 million a year? And I've been told that it is a different niche, so to speak. And so I'm going to trust my fellow board members and our staff experts and go with that, I guess. Does anyone have a last comment before we?
Vice Chair,
Yes.
I apologize, but I just want to be careful that we don't keep calling this an audit. They are going after data research. It's not an audit.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I appreciate Vice Chair Belknap's point on that, because keep in mind too, the money that, so getting back to the purpose of this motion for your approval of the use of these funding, federal mineral lease money is designed for research and development. So it fits right in there. The state money is unrestricted, and the land exchange portion, research, right? And this is another drive, not the entirety, but another driving factor of working with a research type entity such as BYU and not a vendor per se, right? Is because it fits for allowable use of the funds too. That's not the only reason, but it fits very well. It would stand an audit, I'm sure.
Thank you. Chair Huntsman.
I think there's a tremendous ROI that's going to come, and it's going to be, do we have the right size cannon shooting at the fly or something else? And so I'm really anxious to get to see this work done. I mean, it's almost every meeting that we have, it's about privacy, and it is a big thing. And I think it's the best use of the funds. ROI will benefit not just this agency, but other agencies that that have to deal with this sensitive data. We're constantly learning from each other, so.
Thank you.
FYI, thank you.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion on the floor that the board approves using the remaining $93,888.57 of land exchange funds, $67,544.96 of federal mineral lease funds, and $34,166.47 of state funds for a total of $195,600 for the purpose of entering into a sole source agreement with Brigham Young University to conduct research on data sharing between the State Education Agency, USBE, office and LEA's vendors and other agencies for the purpose of reporting on the specific data being shared, the reasons for the data being shared, and the use of the data being shared. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. That passes unanimously.
Thank you. That concludes our report.
We haven't approved the contract, so we.
Okay, so
Thank you, sorry.
currently we need to bring the contract off the table for USBE and number USBE 230007CT Brigham Young University. So then we need a motion.
So I'll move that we approve,
We have to bring a motion
Oh.
to take it off the table. And
a motion
So-
to take it
so-
off first? I thought it
yeah,
already
you're gonna
was
take
off.
it off
Okay.
and then
I
put it
moved to
on and a
moved to-
motion to act.
Got it, okay. I move to take off the table the contract previously held for Brigham Young University on data privacy review.
Do we have a second?
Well, you can also include in your motion whether you want it approved.
Oh,
I'll wrap that in then, and move to approve that contract, now that we've approved the source of the funding for the contract.
I'll
Do we-
second that.
was that Natalie?
Yes.
Okay. Can I see that again?
Yeah.
This
Sorry.
one, right?
I don't know why it's I don't know why it's.
This one right here. Okay. So we have a motion on the floor
Sorry.
that we just lost. We have a motion on the floor to bring off of the table and approve USBE 23 we have a motion on the floor to bring off the table and approve USBE 230007CT Brigham Young University contract. And approve. Those in favor, do we have some discussion to the motion? Board Member Cannon?
I just would like to take a moment to share. Board Member Straight, who represents us on NASB's GAC committee, and I were in a meeting earlier in the week where we heard from those who have an ear to what goes on in the Hill, and we heard about data privacy for students. It's Senate Bill 1628, and it is looking at Children's Online Protection Act, COPA, and it will increase the age of those covered for their data privacy from 13 to 17. And that is ongoing at the federal level. Just a point of information. Thank you.
Thank you. Covered for what? Is the question. I don't know if it's appropriate for me to ask that right now. For filtering? Thank you. Okay. We have a motion on the floor, again, to pull off the floor, to pull off the table, USBE 230007CT, Brigham Young University, and approve the contract. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That passes unanimously. Is that a wrap, Chair Moss?
That is a wrap. Thank you for catching that last.
Thank you.